She stood alone at the edge of the platform, rain soaking her coat, hands shaking as she unfolded a crumpled note. One sentence was underlined in red ink. Her breath caught. This was never meant for her eyes. Some truths don't just hurt. They change who you are forever. The train station was almost empty, its echoes hollow and unforgiving. People passed by, unaware of the woman frozen near the bench, clutching a folded note like it weighed more than her entire body. Maya had found it by accident, slipped between the pages of an old book while packing. At first, she thought it was a grocery list or a forgotten reminder, but the handwriting stopped her heart. It was his, her husband's. The rain blurred her vision, but the words stayed painfully clear. Confessions, apologies, regrets that had never been spoken aloud. Each line felt like a quiet betrayal, not loud enough to scream, but sharp enough to cut deep. She remembered the years she had trusted him, the nights she waited, the excuses she accepted because love had taught her patience. Standing there, she questioned everything she thought she knew. People often say love is blind, but Maya realized something darker. Love sometimes teaches us not to ask questions we're afraid to answer. The note trembled in her hands as memories collided with reality. She wanted to tear it apart, to pretend she had never read it. But once a truth enters your heart, it refuses to leave quietly. Maya sank onto the cold bench, the station lights flickering above her. Her mind drifted backward, replaying moments she had once cherished. The late dinners he missed, the tired smiles, the way he avoided her eyes when she asked simple questions. She had chosen to believe his silence was exhaustion, not distance. The note said otherwise. It spoke of choices he regretted, of moments when he had failed her, of a truth he claimed would destroy everything if spoken aloud. The most painful part wasn't what he admitted. It was when he wrote, "She deserved better, but I was too afraid to become better." Maya pressed the paper to her chest, feeling something inside her crack. Love had taught her sacrifice, but no one warned her how heavy unspoken truths could be. She wondered if he had planned to give her the note someday, or if it was meant to stay hidden forever. Around her, announcements echoed. Trains arrived and departed, but Maya remained still. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was the quiet collapse of the future she thought was certain. As the rain softened into a drizzle, Maya remembered the girl she used to be. Hopeful, trusting, full of dreams. She had believed love was enough to fix anything. The note challenged that belief, forcing her to confront a painful reality. Love without honesty slowly erodes the soul. She read the lines again, slower this time. Beneath the regret was fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of loss, fear of change. And suddenly, her anger softened into something heavier, sad understanding. He hadn't written the note to hurt her. He had written it because he couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. Maya wiped her tears, conflicted. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let this truth burn the bridge behind her. Another part remembered the kindness they once shared, the sacrifices they both made, the love that had once felt unbreakable. Standing at the edge of truth, she realized forgiveness wasn't about excusing pain. It was about deciding whether pain would define her future. The note wasn't just his confession. It was her crossroads. Maya folded the note carefully, as if respecting its fragility might protect her own heart. She imagined him writing it late at night, pen hesitating, emotions spilling where words had failed in real life. That image hurt more than the confession itself. She had always believed that love meant staying. Now she wondered if love sometimes meant leaving, or at least demanding honesty, no matter the cost. The thought terrified her. Change always does. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. His name flashed on the screen. She didn't answer. Not yet. She needed to breathe, to understand what this truth asked of her. The station clock ticked loudly, reminding her that time doesn't pause for emotional storms. Maya stood again, taller this time. The pain was still there, but beneath it was something new, clarity. She realized the note hadn't broken her. Silence had, and silence was something she refused to carry any longer. Maya walked out of the station, rain washing over her like a quiet cleansing. She didn't know what she would say when she finally faced him. She didn't know if love would survive the truth, but she knew one thing. She deserved honesty, even if it hurt. The note stayed in her pocket, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Love should never require shrinking yourself to keep peace. Real love grows through courage, not avoidance. As she disappeared into the crowded street, Maya wasn't just a woman holding a note no one should ever read. She was someone choosing to face pain rather than live in comfortable silence. And sometimes that choice is the beginning of healing. Maya didn't go home that night. Instead, she wandered through the city, letting the noise drown out the storm inside her chest. Every streetlight felt like a silent witness to her unraveling thoughts. She replayed her marriage in fragments, holidays that felt forced, conversations cut short, laughter that faded too quickly. How many times had she ignored the quiet alarms because love had taught her endurance? She stopped at a small cafe near the river, sitting by the window as steam fogged the glass. The note burned in her pocket. She didn't need to read it again. Every word had carved itself into her memory. What haunted her most wasn't betrayal. It was the realization that both of them had been lonely in the same space. Love had slowly turned into routine, and routine had become silence. Maya sipped her coffee, now cold, wondering when she had last felt truly seen. She remembered the woman she once promised herself she would never lose, the one who spoke her truth, even when her voice shook. Outside, couples passed by, hands intertwined, laughter effortless. Maya felt no jealousy, only grief for what her own love had become. Still, beneath the sadness, something stirred. She wasn't broken beyond repair. She was awake, and awakening, she realized, often comes wrapped in pain. When Maya finally returned home near dawn, the house felt unfamiliar, like a place she had outgrown overnight. His shoes were by the door untouched, a reminder that life had continued normally for him, at least on the surface. She stood in the hallway, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of years settle around her. She went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, the note resting on her palm. This room had held whispered promises and unspoken disappointments. She wondered how many nights he had lain awake beside her, burdened by truths he never shared. Maya wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out, leaving behind something more honest, disappointment mixed with compassion. People didn't hide because they were cruel. They hid because they were afraid. Her phone buzzed again. A message this time. "Are you okay?" She stared at it for a long moment before placing the phone face down. Not answering wasn't punishment. It was self-preservation. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to imagine a future not built on guessing someone else's feelings. Whether with him or without him, she needed clarity. And clarity, she knew, required a conversation that could no longer be postponed. The morning light crept in slowly, painting the walls in pale gold. Maya hadn't slept, but exhaustion felt distant compared to the storm she was preparing to face. She showered, letting the water run longer than usual, as if it could wash away years of quiet compromise. As she dressed, memories surfaced. How she once believed love meant forgiving endlessly, but forgiveness without change had only taught her to accept less. That realization stung, yet it also strengthened her resolve. She placed the note carefully inside her bag, not to accuse, not to shame, but to speak truth when words failed. When he finally emerged from the bedroom, surprise flickered across his face. "You weren't home," he said softly. "I know," Maya replied, meeting his eyes for the first time since reading the note. Something shifted in that moment. He sensed it. The air felt heavier, charged with something unavoidable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply said, "We need to talk." Those 4 words carried the weight of years. And for the first time, Maya felt grounded, not because the pain was gone, but because she was no longer running from it. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the space between them filled with things left unsaid. Maya watched his hands tremble slightly as he reached for his coffee. She wondered if he already knew what she had found. "I found something," she said calmly, pulling the note from her bag and placing it on the table. The color drained from his face. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask questions. He simply closed his eyes, as if bracing for impact. "I was going to tell you," he whispered. Maya nodded slowly. "But you didn't." That truth settled heavily between them. Love wasn't destroyed by mistakes alone. It was destroyed by the absence of honesty. He spoke then. About fear. About regret. About feeling trapped by his own cowardice. His words were raw, imperfect, but real. Maya listened without interrupting. She owed herself that much. And when he finished, she realized something profound. He was finally speaking, but she had changed. Hearing the truth didn't heal the wound, but it gave her the power to decide what came next. Tears finally came, not explosive, but quiet and heavy. Maya felt them fall without shame. She had carried too much for too long to apologize for her pain now. "I loved you enough to wait," she said softly, "but I won't love you enough to disappear." Those words surprised even her. They weren't rehearsed. They were honest. He reached for her hand, then stopped unsure. That hesitation spoke volumes. Sometimes, distance grows not from lack of love, but from unresolved fear. Maya stood, feeling steadier than she expected. "I need time," she said, "not to punish you, to find myself again." She walked away from the table knowing the road ahead would be painful, uncertain, and lonely at times. But it would be real. The note remained behind, no longer her burden to carry alone. As she stepped outside, sunlight warming her face, Maya realized that second chances don't always mean staying. Sometimes they mean choosing yourself and trusting that healing begins the moment you stop betraying your own truth. Maya moved into a small apartment across town, a place with bare walls and unfamiliar silence. At first, the quiet felt unbearable. There were no shared routines, no half-finished conversations lingering in the air. Just her thoughts, loud, relentless, honest. But slowly, the silence began to soften. She spent mornings walking by the river, watching the water move forward without hesitation. It reminded her that life didn't pause for heartbreak. She journaled at night, writing letters she never intended to send. Some were filled with anger, others with gratitude. Most were filled with grief for the version of herself that had waited too long. Friends reached out, offering comfort, but Maya learned that healing was deeply personal. No one else could decide how much pain she was allowed to feel. She allowed it all. Occasionally, messages from him appeared, apologies, reflections, promises of change. She read them without responding, not because she didn't care, but because she finally cared about herself enough to listen inward first. For the first time in years, Maya wasn't living for reassurance. She was learning to sit with uncertainty, and within that discomfort, something unexpected grew: self-respect. She realized that love should never require self-abandonment. That lesson, though painful, felt like the beginning of something honest. Weeks passed, and Maya slowly rebuilt pieces of herself she hadn't realized were missing. She cooked meals she liked, rearranged her schedule, and rediscovered old hobbies abandoned for convenience. Each small choice felt like reclaiming lost ground. One afternoon, she found herself rereading the note, not with pain this time, but with clarity. She noticed the fear behind the words, the emotional immaturity disguised as regret. For the first time, she understood that his silence had never been about her worth. It had been about his inability to face himself. That realization didn't erase the hurt, but it released her from carrying blame that was never hers. She thought about forgiveness, not as reconciliation, but as freedom. Forgiveness didn't mean returning. It meant loosening the grip of resentment so it no longer controlled her future. Maya wrote one final letter in her journal, not to him, but to herself. She apologized for ignoring her instincts, for mistaking endurance for love, and then she made a promise to never again silence her needs for the comfort of others. Healing wasn't linear. Some days still hurt, but the pain no longer felt like punishment. It felt like growth. When Maya finally agreed to meet him again, it wasn't out of longing. It was out of closure. They chose a quiet park, neutral ground where emotions could breathe. He looked different, tired, reflective, stripped of certainty. He spoke openly this time, not defensively. He talked about therapy, about confronting his fears, about learning what honesty required. Maya listened, appreciative but cautious. Change, she had learned, was shown through consistency, not words. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I see it now." She nodded. "Seeing it matters," she replied, "but so does timing." They sat in silence, watching leaves fall, understanding that love doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means honoring what was, without forcing what cannot be. Maya felt sadness, but also peace. She had faced the truth and survived it. As they parted, she realized something profound. The note that once shattered her had also freed her. It had forced honesty into a life built on avoidance. And that honesty had changed her forever. Life slowly found a new rhythm. Maya laughed again, softly at first, then freely. She connected more deeply with friends, listened more closely to herself. Love, she realized, didn't disappear. It evolved. She volunteered at a local support center, listening to stories of others navigating loss and betrayal. Each shared experience reminded her that pain was universal, but so was resilience. Sometimes she thought of him, not with bitterness, but with acceptance. They had loved each other with the tools they had at the time. Now, they were learning differently, separately. One evening, as she stood by her apartment window, she noticed how steady she felt. The loneliness that once terrified her had transformed into solitude, calm, grounding, empowering. Maya understood now that second chances don't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes they arrive as endings, and endings, though painful, create space for truth, growth, and self-respect. She no longer needed the note. Its lesson had already been written into her heart. Months later, Maya tucked the note into a box of memories, not hidden, not discarded, simply acknowledged. It no longer defined her pain. It marked her turning point. She had learned that love should be a place of safety, not uncertainty. That kindness includes honesty. That sacrifice should never require silence. Standing on her balcony as the city lights flickered on, Maya felt gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it brought. She had chosen courage over comfort, truth over illusion, herself over fear. And in doing so, she found something stronger than heartbreak, self-worth. The woman who once stood alone, holding a note no one should ever read, was no longer alone. She stood grounded, whole, and unafraid to demand the love she deserved. Time did what it always does. It softened the sharpest edges. Maya no longer woke with heaviness in her chest. The ache had transformed into something quieter, almost respectful, like a scar that reminded her of survival rather than pain. One morning, she received a message from him again. This time, it wasn't an apology or a request. It was a simple thank you. Thank you for forcing truth. Thank you for not hating me. Thank you for letting me grow, even if it was without you. Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. She felt no urge to respond, no anger, no longing, just acceptance. That, she realized, was healing. She had learned that closure doesn't always arrive with answers. It arrives when questions stop controlling you. That afternoon, she walked by the same train station where everything had begun. The memory no longer overwhelmed her. Instead, it reminded her how far she had come. She smiled softly, aware that pain had shaped her but had not consumed her. Maya understood now that truth, though brutal, had rescued her from a life of quiet dissatisfaction. Love should expand you, not diminish you. And if honesty ends a relationship, then the relationship was already standing on fragile ground. She walked away lighter, carrying nothing she hadn't chosen. Maya's world slowly filled with new connections, people who listened without assumptions, who spoke honestly even when it felt uncomfortable. She noticed how different love felt when it wasn't wrapped in uncertainty. She began dating again, cautiously, intentionally, not searching for perfection, but for presence, for communication, for someone unafraid of truth. More importantly, she deepened her relationship with herself. She trusted her instincts now. She honored discomfort as a signal, not a weakness. One evening, while journaling, she realized she no longer replayed the note in her mind. Its power had faded. What once felt like betrayal had become a lesson in boundaries and self-respect. She wrote, "Love without honesty is loneliness disguised as companionship." That sentence stayed with her. Maya wasn't bitter. She wasn't hardened. She was clearer. She believed in love, but not at the cost of her voice. The human heart, she realized, doesn't break from truth. It breaks from silence. And silence was something she would never accept again. On a quiet evening, Maya shared her story at the support center where she volunteered. She spoke of the note, not in detail, but in meaning. She spoke of how truths we avoid eventually demand to be heard. The room was silent. Some listeners cried. Others nodded in recognition. Afterward, a young woman approached her and whispered, "I thought I was the only one." Maya smiled gently. "You never are." In that moment, she realized that pain, when processed with honesty, becomes compassion. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a bridge for others. She had once stood alone, shattered by words she wasn't meant to read. Now, she stood grounded, using those same words as fuel for empathy. The note had failed to destroy her. Instead, it taught her courage. And courage, she learned, is contagious. Late one night, Maya revisited the box of memories. She removed the note one last time, reading it not with hurt, but gratitude. It had told the truth he couldn't say aloud, and that truth had saved her from a life built on guessing. She folded the paper slowly, then placed it back, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that she had chosen honesty over illusion, growth over fear, herself over silence. Maya realized something powerful. Love doesn't fail when it ends. It fails when people stop being brave enough to be honest within it. She closed the box, finally at peace. Standing by her window as dawn approached, Maya watched the city wake. Light spilled across rooftops, quiet and forgiving. She thought about the woman she once was, standing alone, holding a note no one should ever read. And she smiled for her, because that woman had survived. She had learned that truth, no matter how painful, is a gift. It frees us from living half-lives. It teaches us who we are when comfort is stripped away. Maya breathed deeply, ready for whatever came next, not because she feared loss, but because she trusted herself to endure it. And that made all the difference. Some truths hurt because they set us free. Love grows where honesty lives, and healing begins when we stop silencing ourselves. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe, and join our Heart Angels family, where compassion, truth, and hope always have a place.